Our next presenter for Arthritis Talks, a registered dietitian who has made the trek down the QE2 from Edmonton. She was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 19, and her quest to manage her own disease led her to become a dietitian. She's now a senior dietitian with Edmonton's Southside Primary Care Network and has been honored with various local and national awards. As a former national spokesperson for Dietitians of Canada, she's also deeply involved in nutrition education in her community and promises to be a very entertaining source of information for us today. Please welcome Lalitha Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning, Canada. It is a pleasure to be here. As Doug mentioned, I have a personal connection to the Arthritis Society, and I feel like I have a personal connection to all of you who are here today, tuning in and present at other locations. As Doug mentioned, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 19, and I can empathize with some of the struggles that many of you have been faced with when you do have a diagnosis of arthritis. Arthritis. Arthro meaning joints, itis meaning inflammation. There are over 100 different types of arthritis. There's osteoarthritis, there's lupus, gout, ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and I could go on. Anyone can be diagnosed with arthritis. It doesn't discriminate against age, race, or gender. And many of the symptoms include joint swelling, joint pain, fatigue, and stiffness. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight today on my personal story, because I think that's going to connect you more to who I am, and I think it will resonate with you. We're going to go into detail in regards to foods that ease inflammation. This is a hot topic nowadays, and I'm happy to share with you the most up-to-date research on some of the nutrients that really can provide relief to your body. We'll briefly talk about supplements, and then we'll go into our question and answer period. When I was young, I had a thirst for travel. And when I was 18 years old, I left my home, which was in Lacombe, Alberta, and I said, I'm gonna live in Costa Rica for a year. And I had the pleasure of teaching English in that country for a year. And I remember one morning, I woke up and I had this really uncharacteristic pain in my left pinky. And I thought, wow, did a bug bite me? It was big, my joint was big and swollen, and there was a lot of pain, and it didn't go away. And then the next day, well, not the next day, maybe a week later, I had a similar pain in my other pinky on the other hand. And I was like, this is really weird. Did that same bug bite me again? And I couldn't understand why I was getting this inflammation. When I came back to Canada, sure enough, my family doctor sent me for some testing, and by that time it was in my wrists. It was even in some of the joints in my jaw. I was having difficulty walking at that time, and I had that RF factor in my blood, and I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And especially at a young age, I was playing competitive soccer at the time. It was very hard for me to go through that because I was extremely debilitated at that point, and it did play a role in terms of lowering, I would say, my mental health. I went through years of failing medications. I was on biologics, methotrexate, you name it, I was trying it. In the interim, life happens. Life doesn't stop when you get diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune disease or when you have arthritis in general. Life keeps going. And it was amazing. I was off my medications for a period of time to allow me to get pregnant with my beautiful daughter, Gabrielle. And it was like a miracle. When I was pregnant, I was like, I am healed. And I don't know if any of you guys have gone through this, but when you are pregnant and you have RA, it is healing. You completely have no pain. I was asymptomatic. I completely went into remission. But unfortunately, after I had her, it came back with a vengeance. Now my daughter is about 11 years old and she is thriving. What I discovered 20 years later after being diagnosed, it's not just nutrition. And I want to be clear about that. Even though I am a registered dietitian standing in front of you today, it's not just about nutrition that helps you manage your arthritis. I discovered that there were certain things that exacerbated my inflammation, exacerbated my pain, my fatigue. If I was more stressed, that could cause inflammation. I might isolate myself socially if I'm feeling more stiffness or pain. If I wasn't participating in activity, if I was not eating my vegetables and fruit and perhaps having more processed food that was high in sugar, salt, and fat. And this was a huge one for me as well. And not just for me, because I counsel so many patients on inflammation. If I wasn't getting enough sleep, wow, it created the perfect storm for more inflammation and pain. But what I realized throughout this whole process is there are factors in our lives that we have control over. I'm going to read the caption at the bottom here. It says, "Take one of these whenever you get the cap off." I'm glad that you guys are laughing because this truly happened to me. I remember my physician giving me a prescription for like diclofenac or naproxen, some type of NSAID, and I'm like, I can't even get this thing open. My wrists were so inflamed. Okay, so we're gonna get right into it, and we're gonna start off with fruits and vegetables. So one of the things that we have discovered, there is potency of medicinal properties that are found in our vegetables and fruits. So our dark green and orange vegetables, and what I tell my patients is if you can get a very vibrant, colorful, rich-looking vegetable and fruit, there is going to be more nutrients present in that product. So what we know is certain antioxidants, such as vitamin C, which are present in these vegetables and fruit, actually play a role in reducing pro-inflammatory prostaglandins and reducing your C-reactive protein. And some of you guys who have rheumatoid arthritis, for example, you will probably be getting your ESR and CRP tested. And it's amazing how when you do increase the amount of vitamin C in your diet, that can influence and lower that inflammatory marker. Red peppers. Did you know that red peppers have more vitamin C than an orange? I don't think a lot of people realize that. Oranges, Brussels sprouts, and broccoli. One of the reasons why there's an asterisk by broccoli is because there's a beautiful phytonutrient within broccoli known as sulforaphane. Has anybody heard of that before? Not only does it lower your risk of cancer, but it also has properties to help lower inflammation as well. So if you don't like broccoli, you should figure out a way to grind it up and put it in your smoothie. Everybody should be getting on board with having broccoli at least 2 to 3 times a week. That beautiful, rich, dark orange color that we find in pumpkin, sweet potato, all of that can also reduce those inflammatory markers like CRP. And so when we're thinking about, again, something practical, a message that you can take home, I want you guys to just put your fist out for me right now. Okay, look at that fist. Your fist is approximately 1 cup, all right? So if you can make a goal of having at least 4 fists of vegetables and fruits a day, you are going to be seeing some of the benefits of lower inflammation. So let's talk about, how do I reach 4 fists of vegetables and fruits a day? And so one of the things I like to encourage people to do is aim to have fruits as a part of a healthy breakfast and also as a snack. So for example, if you're having something like oatmeal in the morning, put some blueberries, put some strawberries on top of that. One thing that we know about red and purple berries as they are full of something known as anthocyanins. And anthocyanins, again, have been shown to reduce inflammation. Doug mentioned he has been blessed with gout a couple times. And one of the things we know about these anthocyanins is that they can actually play a role in reducing the pain and the inflammation associated with gout. For a snack, have perhaps some strawberries or even an apple with some nuts. So it's easy to make up these recommended amounts if you plan, again, to have them in your diet. Canada's Food Guide was recently released this year, and I'm going to show you a visual. There's some visuals here on the slides, but essentially our plates at home should be looking like this. So half of your plate should be full of those vegetables. So this is where you can get your broccoli, you can get your sweet potato, your carrots. It could be a beautiful salad on half of your plate. And then about 1 fist or less should be that starchy component. And then if you open up your hand and look at the palm of your hand, that palm size and the thickness of your palm essentially is your protein. In North America, we tend to all pretty much gravitate towards half of the plate being the starch, and I would say about 1/3 being the protein and maybe a few tablespoons being the vegetables. But again, you can play a role in lowering your inflammation and also lowering your body weight if you're able to shift your portions around. Nuts and seeds. I am a huge fan of nuts and seeds, and there's so much good research to support the usage of implementing nuts and seeds within the diet, not just from an inflammatory perspective, lowering inflammation, but from a cardiovascular health perspective as well. So we know that people who consume nuts and seeds on an ongoing basis have lower levels of inflammation. There are rich sources of vitamin E, which actually help reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines and reduce that C-reactive protein. You don't have to be pigeonholed into one particular nut or seed. You can have a variety. There's almonds, Brazil nuts, it could be walnuts, pumpkin seeds, peanuts. You could use nut butter or seed butter. We want to aim for more of the raw nuts versus the roasted because raw nuts are going to be less processed. And we also want to aim for unsalted nuts. I had a patient the other day who said, I am really enjoying those nuts that you prescribed to me. I love that hickory smoked barbecue flavor. And I said, okay, let's take this one more step into a better direction. So we really want to go for the unsalted because, again, we also know that salt can play a role in inflammation as well. So if you look at your hand, and I love sort of using our hands as guides for portions, but if you look at your hand, it's not necessarily a handful of nuts that you want, it's fingertips touching palm. So whatever you can fit into that little nook, that is going to be an appropriate portion for you. And that literally works out to about 1 ounce. So if you can aim to have that once a day, you're going to be, again, heading in a better direction with lowering your inflammation. How many of you guys have heard about omega-3s? Yeah, the majority of this room, I would say, for sure. And there is a lot of research to support the usage of omega-3 fatty acids, again, with lowering inflammation. Omega-3s also play a significant role in our cardiovascular health. So there are 3 essentially types of omega-3 fatty acids. There's DHA, which is that docahexanoic acid, EPA, eicapentanoic acid, and ALA, which is alpha-linolenic acid. The superior sources of these omega-3s are what is going to be found in fatty fish. So salmon, mackerel, herring, rainbow trout, sardines, all of that contains a very potent source of that EPA and DHA. Now, some of you in this room do not like fish, not interested, and a lot of people are, then you can get omega-3, the ALA, that's the plant source, through sources like flaxseed oil or ground flax, walnuts, and even canola oil will have some of those omega-3s. If you are not having any omega-3s in your diet, if you can reflect on your intake with me, this would be a great opportunity after today to start to see if it makes a difference. Fish can be expensive. And so one of the things that I recommend is even getting canned, low-sodium wild salmon. You could make that into a salmon salad. So you can think about choosing economical sources that you can store in your cupboard. And if you even have 1 can of that salmon a week, you've already hit your servings. Plant-based proteins. There's a huge body of research that shows individuals who are eating more plant-based proteins have lower inflammation, better body mass index or body weight, and also improved cardiovascular health. We know that when we're consuming more pulses and legumes within the diet, so I'm talking about our chickpeas, our lentils, our kidney beans, we find lower inflammation. So all of these foods that I just mentioned, they're rich sources of protein. They're high in iron, they're high in fiber, high in folate and potassium. They don't have any saturated fat or very low in saturated fat, and they are cholesterol free. These types of plant-based proteins, they're easy replacements for red meat. And I often encourage patients that I work with to try and have at least 3 to 4 meatless meals per week, if possible. So if you guys are like, I don't know, beans, they're not my thing. I don't even know how to prepare them. I recommend start with lentils. Lentils, you don't have to soak ahead of time. You can just prepare them. And I want to ask you guys, do you guys know who exports the largest amount of lentils in the world? And do you know which province? So somebody raise your hand and tell me. Okay, yes. It is Saskatchewan. Our neighbor is the world's largest exporter of lentils. Do you mind coming up to the front? So to get you started on your meatless meals, I have a cookbook on lentils for you. You're welcome. Oh, great. If you guys are also curious, lentils.org is a fabulous website to access. You can find numerous recipes on how to cook lentils and how to incorporate them into everyday dishes. pulsescanada.org is also a wonderful website where you can also access many resources and many recipes to get you going. Tea. Now, I thought this was really interesting when I did some research in this area. So, studies have shown that green, black, and oolong tea have been found to lower inflammation within the body. Now, there is a certain type of flavonoid called catechins that are present in these teas. So the loose leaf tea is actually more beneficial because there's a greater surface area and there's more potency of the catechins when you actually drink this tea. So I often recommend if you're having juice or maybe pop throughout the day, replace some of those sugary beverages with something like tea. And I'm not proposing that you add sugar to the tea. Try to drink the tea plain. You can even drink the tea cold. But this is something that if you enjoy tea, try having this and more often so that you can get the benefits of these powerful flavonoids that have been shown to lower inflammation. Aim to drink about 3 cups per day in between meals. Whole grains. So again, when we think about carbohydrate, many people will say, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm cutting out carbs. But there's actually a lot of research to show that when you include the right type of carbohydrate, complex carbohydrates that are high in fiber, this can actually make you feel fuller longer, give you energy, but it can also lower inflammation. Barley. So barley is very economical in Canada, and it is a significant source of fiber. In fact, 1 cup of cooked barley has around 6 grams of fiber. Now, to put that into perspective, I'm just going to throw out some numbers. Women, on average, need about 25 grams of fiber per day. Men need approximately 38. We don't reach that number as Canadians, but we can if we increase our servings of vegetables and fruit, and if we are more diligent with the types of carbohydrate we choose to include in our diet, like barley, like things like oatmeal. So oats and barley contain a specific type of soluble fiber known as beta-glucan. And beta-glucan has been shown to lower inflammation. So some of you might be wondering, what is soluble fiber? So soluble fiber, there's 2 types of fiber we find in our diet, soluble and insoluble. Soluble forms a gel-like viscous solution that's mixed with water within the gut. And when we have soluble fiber, we are actually able to absorb nutrients better. It aids in digestion, and it also lowers inflammation. Insoluble fiber, it creates bulk to our stool, and it increases the transit time of our stool. So both of these fibers are very important, but we want to focus in more on soluble to help lower inflammation. When you're thinking about looking at the grains that you have in your diet, so whether it be a slice of bread, whether it be a whole grain tortilla, make sure you're looking at the nutrition label. There's a lot of information there. And if you scroll down and you see that your slice of bread maybe only has 1.5 grams of fiber, you could do better. There are breads out there that have up to 6 grams of fiber per slice. So that's a great way to get more of these healthy whole grains into the diet by looking at the nutrition label and getting more fiber for your buck. Herbs and spices. And I'm sure many of you guys have heard about turmeric because that's been in the media. And there was actually a case of somebody getting a turmeric infusion who passed away. So again, when we're thinking about herbs and spices, this is something we definitely want to have within the diet, but you don't necessarily need to be taking supplements. You don't necessarily need to be taking capsules or infusions to enjoy herbs and spices within the diet. One of the things that's wonderful about having things like basil and rosemary and turmeric and cumin is when you have more of these spices within the diet, you don't need as much salt. So salt is something that we eat way too much of as Canadians, and salt also triggers inflammatory pathways. So we want to focus in more on those herbs and spices because they do contain anti-inflammatory polyphenols. So we want to, when we are having herbs and spices, make sure that you have them sealed in airtight containers. They're not maybe situated over your stove. I know a lot of people will do that. We want to keep them away from heat. Use these types of spices liberally within the diet and try to taper the amount of salt that you are using. Again, lots of research. Lots of studies, epidemiological studies that show that the Japanese and the Mediterranean diet have a lot of potency when it comes to reducing inflammation, playing a role in reducing cancer, managing diabetes, managing blood sugars, improving cardiovascular health. The Japanese diet, it's lower in fat, sugar, flour, and dairy. And it's very high in vegetables and fruit, sea vegetables, rice, green tea, and soya-based foods. The Mediterranean diet is also low in meat. The emphasis is more on plant-based proteins and fish. Less processed food, less sugar, more vegetables and fruits, whole grains, and olive oil. Interestingly enough, people who are on the Mediterranean diet have around 4 to 5 tablespoons of olive oil a day. So researchers have found there is this key compound in olive oil known as oleocanthal. And if any of you guys have had really good olive oil, that's that burning sensation that you get at the back of your throat. If you have really good olive oil, they suspect that's the oleocanthal. And it has a significant impact on inflammation, and it helps reduce joint damage within that cartilage, joint cartilage damage. So what does our typical Western diet look like? All right, so we got salt, sugar, more of those omega-6 fatty acids, chips, cookies, burgers, fast food, fries, pop. In an editorial produced by the Journal of Rheumatic and Musculoskeletal Diseases, it was stated the modern diet, especially practiced in Western cultures, could be viewed as the greatest enemy of chronic inflammatory conditions. The increased consumption of refined carbs, vegetable oils rich in omega-6, and decreased intake of omega-3s represents the perfect nutritional storm. So what about supplements? And this is a question I get from many of the patients I see as well in clinic. Most of us need to be on vitamin D, especially living in places like Alberta if we don't get exposure to the sun. Calcium could also be of utmost importance, especially if you are on things like prednisone or corticosteroids. Folate. And again, any of you who are on methotrexate know that you should be taking folic acid. Iron could be something that we need to look at. Omega-3, perhaps fatty acid supplements if you're not able to get those within the diet. Glucosamine and chondroitin. Now, I put that one down specifically because a lot of people are on that supplement. It will not harm you, but there's no research to actually say it's going to add any benefit. Okay? So this is an important conversation that you have with your registered dietitian or pharmacist. I have many individuals, for example, who over-supplement with calcium, and that is something that we don't want to be doing because calcium is not water soluble, and it can tend to deposit in our arteries. So it's something that we want to make sure we're not having too much of. Remember, there are lifestyle factors that you have control over. We want to opt for less processed, refined, and sugary foods. We want to aim for a high intake of antioxidant-rich vegetables and fruit. Focus on plant-based proteins, such as legumes, even tofu, soya foods, nuts, and seeds. Incorporate omega-3 fatty acids within the diet. Aim to include whole grains, especially grains that have soluble fiber. Enjoy healthy fats, such as extra virgin olive oil, nuts, avocado. Flavor foods generously with herbs and spices. Drink tea instead of juice or pop or any other sugar-containing beverage. And make sure you check with your health professional to ensure you are meeting the requirements for vitamins and minerals. I want to leave this with you as a reminder. This is not a diet. This is not a diet. This is a lifestyle. And when you are making health goals, commit yourself to the process and tell yourself that this is a lifestyle. And you have to remember what encompasses lifestyle is not just simply nutrition, adequate sleep, stress management, fresh air and exercise, social inclusion, physical activity should be on there as well, and also purpose, determining your why for getting up in the morning. This is a picture of me and my spouse. I've had the opportunity to compete for Team Canada in duathlons a couple times, and it is such a pleasure to let you guys know that I haven't been on medication for about 3 years now. I'm in complete remission, and I am a true believer that there are factors in your life that you do have control over to improve not only the quality of your health, but also the quality of your life. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Fantastic presentation, Lalitha. Thank you so much. I saw that red wine was up there, but I'm going to ignore that. We're going to take questions here in the room. Here in Calgary, we have a couple of mics. We have some mics in Winnipeg. We also have some questions online. So I'm going to get Lalitha back in front of the microphone here, and she'll take some questions. And if you have a question, put up your hand here in Calgary.
You mentioned extra virgin olive oil as being a benefit. Can you talk a little bit about cold-pressed oils versus, like, how do you make better choices when you're looking at the oils in the grocery store?
That's a great question. I think first rule of thumb is if you see olive oil stored in a clear glass container, then that's not an appropriate olive oil for you. You always want to make sure that olive oil is stored in a dark container because it can oxidize. And the cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil will be the superior choice. Does that answer your question?
So that would extend across to other oils, walnut oils, flaxseed oil. Cold-pressed is the best choice?
So the question is, does that extend into other oils, walnut oils, avocado, grapeseed oil? And I appreciate that because you don't necessarily have to use just olive oil in your diet. You can derive many other important factors from different oils. So for example, flaxseed oil has a high amount of omega-3 fatty acids. Avocado oil, walnut oil, all of those have different properties that are beneficial for health. So I think it's great to use a variety of oils within the diet. And again, it's a matter of storing those oils appropriately and making sure that you are aware of the heat point, the smoke point of those oils. Some of them cannot be used for cooking at high temperatures. So for example, flaxseed oil would be something that you would want to drizzle over a salad. Whereas an olive oil would be something that maybe you could do a light saute with, but you wouldn't want to fry anything with. Does that further clarify? Yes. Yes.
No, over here. Microphone.
Lalitha, where can we get a copy of your slide deck?
I believe that is available to you. So if you want to talk with one of the volunteers, I'm sure they will be able to direct you to get that information. Yes, but all that information should be available to you.
What I've noticed here is there seems to be, with inflammation, a real connection between, I deal with IBS as well as arthritis. Mm-hmm. And the suggestions you're making seem to be, would be similar with each. I'm just wondering, is there more of a connection between these two issues than what a person would normally realize?
You know, this presentation and the foods that I'm honing in on that discuss lowering inflammation, you're right. I mean, it goes across the board into other autoimmune diseases. IBS is not an autoimmune disease, it's a functional bowel disorder, but for sure you experience inflammation with that. So by honing in on having more of these foods that are anti-inflammatory, you're also going to benefit greatly from better bowel health as well. So I definitely appreciate that comment and question.
Hi, great presentation. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on like vegetable consumption and raw versus cooked, and I've heard cooking certain vegetables will release certain elements and things like that.
That's right, thank you. So one of the things that we know is in Canada, we don't eat enough vegetables. And so I would say if you enjoy cooked vegetables, if you enjoy roasting them, steaming them, go for it. If you enjoy eating raw vegetables, go for it. I think the key point is to get enough. Now, during the cooking process, many people get concerned that vitamins and minerals are leached out of certain vegetables. That is the case if you're boiling them for an extended period of time. But in some situations, you can actually increase the potassium content through cooking. So I would say don't discriminate between the types of preparation with vegetables. Just ensure that you're getting enough and using them in a variety of ways.
Lalitha, we're going to go to Winnipeg for the next question.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. My question is the incidence of arthritis lower than Japan and in the Mediterranean region? Not necessarily the diet, but amongst those populations.
Thank you. That is a great question. And I am not sure if the incidence of arthritis is lower in Japan or in places like Italy, for example, where they follow more of a Mediterranean diet. But interestingly enough, there is a lot of research that shows places like Japan, specifically Okinawa, Sardinia, they are actually known as blue zones, and so they're hot spots of longevity. So these different types of populations in the world have actually been studied because people who live there live for over 100 years. And so they're very healthy. They have low risks of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and some of the proponents that they follow, and there's 5 hotspots in the world, is that they have plant-based proteins in their diet. They exercise. They have high consumption of healthy fats. So I'm not sure about the lower rates of arthritis, but they do have a better quality of life and quality of health.
Lalitha, we have a question online. Someone wants to know about nightshades, which you would, of course, need to explain first, I would think.
Yes, and so there's a lot of information, especially on the internet, about avoiding nightshades. I'm going to extend that a little bit further to even dairy and gluten. I would say this is where you have to work with a health professional, because there is no cookie cutter approach when it comes to diet. There are certain things that may help an individual if they eliminate it, but you're not necessarily going to know until you work with somebody and figure out whether or not that's something that you actually need to do. The nightshade vegetables, there's a lot of rich, wonderful nutrients inside some of these vegetables, and also with gluten-containing grains and even dairy. So we don't necessarily want to eliminate foods unnecessarily unless it's warranted. And I would further say there's no evidence to substantiate the elimination of nightshade vegetables.
Okay, we're going to go back to Calgary.
Hello? If I could ask if you could address keto and other forms of body modification as an energy medicine. You may not be your area, but keto for sure. When I went to my surgeon about a knee replacement, he put me on keto. I lost 35 pounds. I reduced my inflammation to 0, and I cleared my thyroid.
So thank you for that. Just for clarification purposes, if people don't know what keto is, ketogenic diet is a diet that's very high in fat, about 70% fat. The rest, 20%, is about protein, and less than 10% is carbohydrate. It is not a type of diet that I recommend to a general population, just because it is a very hard diet to sustain, because you are eliminating large amounts of nutrients and food groups within the diet. Now, if you have a specific disease, or if you have to lose weight right away, that might be a different story. But again, you need to be working perhaps with a health professional to make sure that you're still meeting all of your micronutrient needs, because there is a higher degree of deficiencies that can happen when you're following keto. Again, when we're thinking about the best approach to a diet, and this is actually a quote by Arya Sharma, who is a physician. He's an obesity expert in Edmonton, Alberta, and his colleague, Yanni Friedhoff, who is a doctor in Ontario. They came up with this definition regarding best weight, and I would even extend that further to best health. Your best weight is eating as healthy as you can, exercising as much as you can, within a lifestyle that you can enjoy and sustain. So when you make drastic changes to your diet, you have to ask yourself the question, am I going to be able to sustain this? Because if you're not, and you go back to what you were doing before, everything that you've achieved with your health will be for naught.
Lalitha, we have one last question from Winnipeg.
Hi, my name's Jade. I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and my question is, do you have to avoid sugar completely?
I don't think you have to avoid anything. completely within the diet. And again, this speaks to sustainability of healthy eating. And often as dietitians, we use an 80-20 approach. So if you're eating healthy 80% of the time and you want to go out for dinner and have, a piece of steak, or if you want to have a dessert, then go for it. You never want to get into a situation where you feel deprived of anything. When you get into that mode of deprivation, that's what leads to perhaps maybe binge eating, or it could even lead to the development of an abnormal relationship with food. So again, it's really trying to achieve that balance and determining what is going to be sustainable and enjoyable long term, which is still going to be healthy for me.
Thank you so much for your excellent questions, and let's have a big round of applause for Lalitha Taylor.